We forget many things every day, where we put our keys, a song we once knew, and over time, society forgets even some of the most important people. The Lest We Forget Biographical Research Project is a project to find out more about one of these forgotten people of the 20th century. I think that one of the most forgotten important figures of this time is Jonas Salk, one of the grandfathers of vaccination and creator of the polio vaccine. Before this project, all I had known about Jonas Salk was his name was skipped over in a few of my previous history textbooks. However, when researching, I found out there was so much more to his story. During his time, nothing like his actions had ever been seen in the world of science, and when reading his biography, it was commonly said that Jonas was like no other scientist of that time. For this project, I turned to the biography Jonas Salk A Life to provide me with true information on Salk. Salk doesn't particularly have a mired reputation, but he has been forgotten as time goes on. However, if his reputation were to be mired by anything, it would be his unconventional methods, which, while sometimes strange, did produce results, or his occasional disregard for rules. Jonas was the son of Dora Press and Daniel Salk, both of whom immigrated to the United States in hopes of freedom and change from the extreme religious scrutiny they received in their home countries. From a very young age, Jonas was forced to meet his mother's extreme goals. She was, as many immigrant Jewish mothers were, strict due to hoping to create a better life for her children. Jonas took his mother's strict manners and large expectations even after his two brothers were born. It turns out that Jonas was a lot like his father, who was a quiet, reserved man who did what his wife told him to prevent arguments. During Salk's childhood, influenza, polio, and World War I raged on. While Jonas was sheltered by his mother from the horrors, they still peeked through. These conditions are what, in the future, made Jonas want to help the world and the people of it, with his family serving as another important motivator for his future endeavors. Salk even said, "As I look back on my beginning, I'm aware of the influence my family had on me, my parents especially, and the circumstances that existed in the world at that time." As I said, his family and the conditions of the world inspired him to do what he became famous for. But what is that? Vaccination. Jonas Salk is known for his contributions to science, specifically medicine and the creation of vaccines. It involves a lot of scientific terms that often tended to confuse me when I was conducting my research, but here's the gist. All wrapped up and summarized, Jonas tended to break the rules and explore unconventional roads. While they didn't always lead to success, when they did, he made some pretty large breakthroughs. While not being the creator of the influenza vaccine, he was a large contributor to making the vaccine what it is. Salk, finding and applying many other methods with his own, helped create the first influenza vaccine. He eventually helped create a vaccine that could prevent influenza and started researching polio after some small other research projects of his. His work on the polio virus actually started with him being involved in a typing project, aka a project that determined all the strands of the polio virus. His curiosity did not let him stop there, though. He decided that he wanted to put his skills to use and work on creating a vaccine, and so he did. After years of research and tests, he did it. He created the polio vaccine. On April 26, 1954, the National Foundation's polio vaccine trial began to test the safety for the public, and by April 12, 1955, it was finalized and announced that the vaccine was safe for public use. Jonas was now a renowned scientist and creator of one of the most important vaccines in history. While Salk became an amazing scientist, his journey did not come without struggles or hardships. The public might have viewed him as a hero, but in retrospect, Jonas was as human as the average person on the street. Jonas had a rough past. As I said, his mother forced many expectations on him. He also struggled, as most immigrants do, to fit into a society that catered to people not quite like him. On top of this, his childhood was marked with death, diseases, and war troubles, which surrounded him. Jonas was always a bright boy, but he did not even come to rival the top students in his high school or college classes. He did not know from a young age that he wanted to go on and do what he did, but instead wished to be a lawyer, to which his mother disagreed, then to study medicine, which she still did not support. Throughout his career, he also struggled to make ends meet, often being paid very little. This was rough when it was just him, but became even rougher when he had a family to support, which brings me to my next point. Salk had a difficult time balancing his research and his family, typically thinking about his work when at home. Salk was always worrying or thinking about his work. In fact, oftentimes, his sleep was interrupted by his overactive mind. While he loved what he did not like how stifled he felt at times in the world of academia. Salk also found that the scientific world was full of unaccepting people who would tear him down every chance they got. I think that we can all relate to some part of his past, whether it be trying to fit into an unaccepting society, to dealing with strict parental expectations, or struggling to balance a work and home life. I think we should remember Salk as a great scientist and legendary virologist. If it were not for his contributions to the scientific world, I could bet you many people would still be dying due to influenza and polio. Influenza and polio were terrible diseases at the time, many times resulting in death or an extremely painful short life. The diseases plagued people's entire styles of living, and people quarantined and frantically cleaned, not knowing this is not how it spread, terrified that they or their children would catch poliomyelitis. In the summer of 1916, according to the biography, New York's playgrounds stood empty. The children were all inside, hiding from the cruel virus known as polio. It started with cold-like symptoms, a runny nose, sore throat, and morphed into fever, restlessness, and pains. Within a few days, the unexpected patient would be paralyzed, and death commonly followed. While influenza foregoed the paralyzation, it had problems of its own. Influenza had yearly outbreaks, and without a vaccine for this disease, it was so much worse than today's flu, typically being a death sentence. Young, healthy adults were attacked by influenza, developing off-the-chart temperatures, chills, muscle aches, and that's just the start. If they were not killed by this, then they often had to deal with coughing fits so extreme that, quote, sputum turned bloody. In the end, if making it to this, a fluid would suffocate the patient by filling the lungs. I can't even imagine a world like that, and commend Salk greatly for his contributions to stop these plagues from seeping their way into the 21st century. I also feel that we should take inspiration from him, because he turned his rough past into a bright future. He used the bad things that occurred in his childhood and used them to motivate himself to make the world a better place, which is something I think we should all do. Jonas Salk, now a name you can say you know. After this, will you remember it?